I watched the white powder dissolve into the champagne. It vanished in less than 2 seconds, swallowed by the bubbles. My father-in-law, Richard, gave the glass a gentle swirl, his face composed in that terrifyingly calm mask he wore whenever he was closing a business deal. Or, in this case, ending a marriage before it had even survived the reception. He didn't know I was watching. I was reflecting off the grand piano's polished lid, hidden behind a massive arrangement of white hydrangeas. My hands were shaking so hard I thought I dropped my clutch. I had 2 choices. I could scream, cause a scene, and look exactly like the unstable, gold-digging, hysterical woman he had spent the last 6 months painting me as to everyone in the Hamptons. Or I could play his game. Richard turned his back to greet a senator. The glasses, 2 identical crystal flutes, sat on the small marble table. I stepped out from behind the flowers. I didn't run. I glided. I walked right up to that table, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I reached out, grabbed the glass on the left, and slid the glass on the right into its place. Maya? I froze. It was Richard. He had turned back around. I was holding his poison glass. He was looking at the glass I had just placed near his hand, the safe one. Thirsty already? He asked, a cold, predatory smile spreading across his face. I smiled back. Just admiring the crystal, Richard. It's flawless. Only the best for my son, he said, picking up the glass from the table. The one I had just switched. Shall we go for the toast? This is the story of how I didn't just survive my wedding day, I dismantled an empire. And it all started because Richard forgot one crucial rule of business. Never underestimate the person who has nothing to lose. But to understand why he tried to drug me in front of 300 people, you have to understand who the Vanderbilts, the Sterlings, actually are. See, when I met Liam, I didn't know his last name carried the weight of a small country's GDP. I met him in a dive bar in Brooklyn. He was wearing a torn flannel shirt and drinking cheap beer. We bonded over bad poetry and stale nachos. It wasn't until 6 months later, when he took me to meet the parents in a literal castle in Connecticut, that I realized I was dating American royalty. And Richard Sterling? He was the king. From day one, Richard hated me. Not the "I wish you were a doctor" kind of hate. It was visceral. I was a graphic designer from Ohio. My dad was a mechanic. To Richard, I wasn't a person. I was a contamination. He offered me $50,000 to leave Liam the first night we met. When I declined, he doubled it. When I declined that, he threatened to ruin my credit score. I thought he was bluffing. Then, my car was repossessed 3 days later due to a clerical error. That was the war. But this wedding? This was the final battle. Fast forward to the reception. The ballroom cost more than my parents' house. The ceiling was dripping with crystals. And there I stood, clutching a glass of champagne that I knew was spiked. The question wasn't just what was in it.
It was why now?
We were already married.
The vows were said.
Why drug me at the reception? As we walked toward the head table, the answer hit me. The prenup. Richard had forced a brutal prenuptial agreement on us. It had an infidelity clause and, more importantly, a competency clause. If either party was deemed mentally unstable or publicly humiliated the family through gross misconduct within the first 48 hours, the marriage could be annulled immediately and the offending party would be sued for damages. He wasn't trying to kill me. He was trying to make me crazy. He wanted me to strip naked or fight a waiter or vomit on the cake.
He wanted a show.
We reached the stage. Liam, my beautiful, naive husband, squeezed my hand. You okay, babe? You're sweating. I'm fine, I lied. Just adrenaline. Richard tapped his spoon against his glass. The room, filled with senators, CEOs, and socialites, fell dead silent. Ladies and gentlemen, Richard boomed. His voice was smooth, like velvet wrapped around a jagged rock. If I could have everyone's attention for a toast to the happy couple.
He looked at me.
His eyes were twinkling with malicious delight. He raised the glass I had put there. To Maya and Liam, he said, "May your life be as exciting as this evening is about to become." He tipped the glass back. I watched his throat move. 1 gulp.
2.
He drained it. Then he looked at me, waiting. He expected me to drink mine. I raised the glass, the one with the poison, to my lips. I tilted it. I let the liquid touch my lips, keeping them sealed tight. I faked a swallow, a convulsing movement of my throat that I'd practiced in theater school years ago. Delicious, I whispered. Richard smirked. He checked his watch. Now the waiting game began. For the first 10 minutes, nothing happened. We sat at the head table. The salads were served. Richard was chatting with the governor of New York to his left. He looked perfectly fine. I started to panic. Had I messed up the switch? Did I imagine the powder? Maybe it was just sugar? Maybe he was testing me? My mind started spiraling. If I was wrong, I was the paranoid freak he said I was. Then the soup arrived. Lobster bisque. Richard reached for his spoon. His hand missed the handle by 2 inches. He frowned, staring at his hand like it belonged to someone else. He tried again, grabbing the spoon aggressively. "Richard, are you all right?" his wife, Evelyn, asked. She was a bird-like woman who usually ignored everything, but even she noticed he was blinking rapidly. "I'm fine," Richard snapped. But his voice, it was too loud. Way too loud. The people at the nearest table turned their heads. It's hot in here," he muttered.
He loosened his tie.
Richard never loosened his tie.
He turned to look at me.
"You feeling okay, Maya?" He was fishing. He was waiting for me to start slurring. "I feel fantastic, Richard," I said, leaning in. Actually, I've never felt more clear-headed. His eyes narrowed. He looked confused. He wiped sweat from his forehead. A lot of sweat. It was beading on his upper lip. 15 minutes post-toast. The waiter came to clear the plates. Richard suddenly grabbed the waiter's wrist. "Do you know who I am?" Richard hissed. The waiter, a terrified college kid, stammered. "Mr. Sterling, sir?" "I am the god of industry," Richard shouted. The room went quiet again. The DJ lowered the jazz music. Liam leaned forward. "Dad? What's going on?" Richard stood up. Well, he tried to. He knocked his chair over backward. It clattered loudly on the parquet floor. He didn't seem to notice.
He was swaying.
"I need." Richard's eyes were darting around the room, wide and dilated. "I need everyone to listen to me. The numbers don't add up." "Dad, sit down," Liam said, standing up to help him. "Don't touch me." Richard shoved his son away with surprising strength. "They're watching us, Liam. The ants. The ants are in the ledger." The crowd gasped. This wasn't just drunkenness. This was a psychotic break. I sat there, frozen, realizing exactly what Richard had slipped into the glass. It wasn't a sedative. It was a hallucinogen, something to induce paranoia and mania. He had intended for me to be screaming about ants in front of the governor. Richard climbed onto the table. Not the stage, the actual dinner table. He stepped right into the centerpiece. "You all think you're so clean," he screamed, pointing a trembling finger at the crowd. "But I know where the bodies are buried. Literally. The disposal site in Jersey. I signed the permits." The governor of New York suddenly looked very pale. He signaled his security detail. "Richard," Evelyn shrieked. "Get down." "Shut up, Evelyn." Richard laughed, a manic, high-pitched sound. "You and your tennis instructor. You think I don't know about the cabana, boy? I bought the cabana." The room was in chaos. Phones were out. Everyone was recording. This was the gross misconduct clause in action, but the target was wrong. Liam looked at me, his eyes filled with fear. "Maya, call 911. Something's wrong with his heart." "It's not his heart, Liam," I said softly. Richard was now stripping off his tuxedo jacket. He threw it into the crowd. "I'm free. The money is a cage. The IRS is coming for the gold bars in the basement." This was it. The truth. In his chemically induced state, Richard wasn't just hallucinating. He was confessing. He had zero filter. "We're broke," Richard howled, tearing at his shirt buttons. "It's a Ponzi scheme. All of it. The Sterling Trust is empty. I spent it all on the offshore accounts." The silence that followed that statement was heavier than the crystal chandelier. The sterling fortune gone? Liam went white. He looked at his father, then at the guests, realizing the magnitude of what had just been said. Security finally made their move. Two large men in suits rushed the table. Richard saw them coming and grabbed a steak knife. "You'll never take me alive, you tax-collecting vultures." He lunged. They tackled him. It took 3 men to hold him down as he thrashed, screaming about government drones and invisible wiretaps. As they dragged him out the side door, still screaming, the wedding planner, a poor woman with a headset who looked like she wanted to die, tried to signal the band to play. But nobody was dancing. Liam sat back down, his head in his hands. He's lost his mind. It's stress. It has to be stress. I placed my hand on his back. I had to tell him. If I didn't, the toxicology report would confuse everyone. "Liam," I whispered. "Look at me." He looked up, tears in his eyes. "He didn't lose his mind," I said. "He was drugged." Liam frowned.
What?
"How do you know?" "Because..." I leaned closer, lowering my voice so only he could hear. "The drug was meant for me." Liam stared at me. The gears were turning. "What are you talking about?" I saw him, Liam. Before the toast. He put powder in one of the glasses. I switched them. You gave my dad drugs?" Liam's voice rose. "No," I said firmly. "He gave himself drugs. I just refused to be the victim." He looked at the empty chair where his father had been sitting.
Then he looked at me.
For a second, I thought he was going to leave me. I thought he would blame me for humiliating his father, for destroying the family reputation. But then, he let out a long breath. He looked at the governor, who was hurriedly leaving the venue. He looked at his mother, who was sobbing into a napkin about the tennis instructor comment. "He tried to do this to you?" Liam asked. "To make you look crazy?" "To trigger the prenup," I explained. "So, he could annul the marriage." Liam looked down at my hands. "And he confessed. He said the money is gone." "If he's telling the truth," I said, "then you're not the heir to an empire, Liam. You're the heir to a fraud case." Liam started to laugh. It was a dry, humorless laugh. I hated the money, anyway. The aftermath was swift and brutal. The ambulance took Richard to Lenox Hill. The toxicology screen came back positive for a potent synthetic hallucinogen, often used in underground party scenes, mixed with a high dose of amphetamines. The doctors were baffled. Why would a 60-year-old CEO dose himself with space dust at his own son's wedding? The police were called, but not for the drugs. They were called because of the confession. The governor, trying to save his own skin, ordered an inquiry into Richard's rant about the disposal site and the IRS. Within 48 hours, the exact time frame of the prenup clause Richard tried to use against me, the FBI raided the Sterling offices. Richard hadn't been lying. The family fortune was built on a massive securities fraud scheme that was weeks away from collapsing.
He was broke.
He needed Liam to marry into another wealthy family to cover the debts, but Liam chose me, a broke girl from Ohio. That's why he hated me. Not because of my class, but because I brought no bailout money. Richard is currently awaiting trial in a federal detention center. He claims he was poisoned. He points the finger at me. But here's the thing about Richard. Nobody believes him. His fingerprints were on the vial found in his jacket pocket. The security footage shows him tampering with the glasses, but the angle blocks the moment of the switch. To the world, it looks like a guilty man who couldn't handle the pressure and decided to go out in a blaze of chemical glory. Liam and I, we didn't get a honeymoon. We spent the first month of our marriage dealing with lawyers. We lost the castle. We lost the penthouse. Liam was cleared of any wrongdoing, mostly because Richard had kept him entirely out of the business, thinking Liam was too soft to handle the crimes. We live in a 2-bedroom apartment in Queens now. Liam teaches literature.
I still do graphic design. We have student loans.
We clip coupons. And every year, on our anniversary, we buy a cheap bottle of champagne. Liam pours 2 glasses. He looks at me, dead serious, and says, "Check the glass." I pretend to inspect it. Then we clink them together. It wasn't the fairy tale wedding I dreamed of. I didn't get the castle or the fortune, but I got the guy. And more importantly, I got the last laugh. Sometimes when I see Richard's mugshot on the news, I think about that moment. The split-second decision to reach out and swap our fates. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but I prefer it served in a crystal flute with a twist.